Hello and welcome to the docket presented by Defense Stars. I'm your host, Bob Mata, and I am joined by my beautiful, brilliant co-host, Allie. What's up, girl?
Hey, babe. Hey, all.
Hey, beautiful humans. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday night. It could be perfect.
Great conversation or whatever Saturday night topic.
I think it's disturbing but important. And I kind of wanted to preface tonight, first of all, going to give a trigger warning. If you have not heard anything or read this bail application regarding Rex Heuermann and the two new charges, it is a lot to digest. It is filled with the evidence that law enforcement has collected against him, and it's incredibly, incredibly disturbing. It's horrifying, really. So just consider yourselves warned. If this is going to be too much for you, then we'd recommend that you take a pass on this live because it's a lot. It just is. And I want to be sensitive to the fact that it could be just too disturbing for some people because it's horrifying, really. And I just want to say that, look, I know that a vast majority of us in the true crime world are completely wrapped up in the Karen Reed trial, but I'm here to tell you definitively, there is no case right now that is more important and more horrifying than the case against Rex Heuermann. I mean, this guy is, of course, alleged at this point, and we're going to start from a baseline of presumed innocent, and we're going to read through this thing, and we're going to see from that baseline where we think we end up. And, you know, if you know anything about me, you know that I've got some of my own weird history with serial killers. My father represented John Wayne Gacy. He was one of his two trial attorneys. My dad had given me all of his taped interviews preparing Gacy for his insanity defense trial, which I turned into a podcast, which you can get right there on that QR code, which we think is pretty epic. Very proud of that. That's going to be out and around long after I'm off this planet, and it's a piece of work that I'm really proud of. And we didn't really focus on Gacy. We focused on the victims, the investigation, the arrest, and the trial. And you know, so I've got kind of a real sense of the sickness that goes on in the minds of these killers. And this thing that we're about to go through is this guy's thoughts in terms of his processes on paper. When we get to that portion of it, it's scary to think that people like this exist out there and they walked among us. So
I want to ask you something, and I don't know, maybe you don't know enough, and I'm like, you know, like just gonna ask you off guard right here. But I don't know. I know he's got a wife and at least a kid, but do you know anything about his everyday life leading up to this? I mean, I don't know anything about it. I don't know if everyone
he was an
here knows.
architect for years and years in Manhattan. You know, I mean, he was another one of those guys that went under the radar, that was out in public, for all intents and purposes, a normal person. And, you know, what we're going to find out here, what this solidified, at least to the public, I don't think it was any surprise to law enforcement, was that he has been active for a very, very long time.
But no criminal record, or do you know?
No, not really. No, I mean, I do know. Yeah, he wasn't. You know, I mean, he was off the radar. He wasn't like Gacy. had been arrested many times. You know, I flamethrow the Chicago police in my series because Gacy should have been stopped after Johnny Bukovich, the third victim, if they've been doing their jobs at all. You know, I absolutely torch the Chicago police because they did jack shit. And they had him in custody many times for essentially the exact same things that he was doing to his victims, short of killing them. You know, these were people that escaped or he let live, that went to go make complaints against him. And it was literally what he was doing to every victim before he ended up ending their lives. And
But this guy was off the radar. He wasn't like there was none of that.
I mean, he was off the radar in terms of law enforcement, I think, and I don't want to be critical of law enforcement here, but again, you know, years ago, they had basically the same starting point where they ended up really kind of digging in again, which was that they had a sex worker that had gone to his house or a house, and actually Heuermann had gone over to this house, and it was a ruse. She had set him up to come over. And you know, one of the witnesses gave a very detailed description of his first generation green avalanche. And it was this witness that really coined probably the most apt moniker in terms of a description of somebody that I've ever heard of, when he said the guy looked like an ogre.
And this is years and years ago.
Years and years ago, over a decade ago. And that just sat there, you know. Obviously because it was that evidence there in terms of those things that really put Heuermann on the radar. They, you know, they did the work that they probably should have done back then. You know, I guess my point is if this turns out to be the nightmare that I think it's going to be beyond what it already is, and they start connecting just God knows how many victims to this guy. Because remember, in New York City, they have his DNA, which they got from the pizza initially. They, you know, the pizza crust he left in this garbage that he threw out, and they were tailing him.
Wait,
You know,
you're talking about Rex? That's
yeah,
how they got. Oh,
yeah. Well, I mean, they were onto him like hard. You know, they were heavy
so
duty.
did they get like the cold case
A lot of
people?
it's going to be in this bail application because they
All
kind of
right,
rehash some of the
they
stuff.
rehash
So,
what they did. Well, I'm
yeah.
sure they cast it in a slightly different light. I mean, I'm
What?
just wondering, like, however, you know, the role that they did before, and I was just wondering if like a new cold case person came in and was like, "We're gonna keep working this," or
Uh, well, yeah, no, I think, you know, power changes hands in agencies, and you know, people take a harder, different look at things. I think is what ultimately ended up happening, and there's a lot going on. Joe Jackalone, who's a friend of mine and a friend of the show, and he's got an amazing YouTube channel. Um, this Sarge is like intimately involved with, you know, just kind of having a real knowledge base of what was going on kind of politically. There's a lot of undertones in this case, kind of what was going on in Suffolk County, that may have played a part in some of the delays. I like, I don't want to get that's like a rabbit hole in and
all
of
right,
itself. It really is. So again, if you're late to the show, we're going to give a trigger warning here. This thing that we're going to go through tonight is not for the faint of heart. Not even like if this kind of like hearing about the details of crimes, of the brutal nature against other people, is something that makes your stomach churn and your skin crawl, then you probably want to bail on this thing, because
And
this is all of that and a little bit more.
And one of the things I do remember from the press release or press conference that we covered with Jay is that there's phone numbers and information in there that law enforcement is hoping might locate some of his intended victims to see if they became, actual victims. So it might be some good work that, internet sleuths or whatever the appropriate nomenclature is,
Yeah.
can do with this thing.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about, and I was starting to say, New York State, they cannot run his DNA through NamUs until they get a conviction.
Wow.
So for all those cases out there
So they've
that
got a
exist,
stronger privacy interest in the New York, Constitution.
right? So, which is frustrating in a lot of ways, but I get it. It's that balance.
Right.
But like I said, I fear that there's going to be a lot more people that this guy has been active for decades. He's 60 now, and um, we are going to find out in very short order here that as far as Jessica Taylor and more importantly Sandra Costilla, in terms of a timeline, that she went missing and was thought to have been killed around November of 1993. So, and he was still pulling his shit with burner phones when they arrested him. So, I mean, you can do that horrible math right there. I mean, this guy's been active for a really, really long time. And the one common denominator with all of the victims is that the family was out of town. So the kids and Asa were all out of town for these first 6 victims. I don't know. It's which kind of goes into, again, I don't want to be critical because I'm so appreciative of what law enforcement's done here. But if it turns out that, when the first kind of opportunity to find him was there, and I think anybody that knows anything about this case knows that there was probably enough in terms of this guy to get a warrant on him. And if they would have gotten a hold of him back when we got the Ogre description in the first gen green avalanche, I mean, theoretically he would have been stopped. And if there turns out to be a bunch of victims that went down, I mean, it's very Gacy-esque. I put 20, 25 plus on Chicago PD because they didn't do their job. And they had them. They had everything they needed, Chicago. Everything to get them. And they just didn't do it. All right, so let's start going through. So, Allie, the first, and one last trigger warning if you're late to the show. All right, so here they do a bail application, babe. So this isn't a probable cause affidavit, but this is the equivalent. So they basically they lay out their probable cause affidavit in the form of a bail application, informing the judge there's no way in hell you can give this guy bail.
I just find it surprising, and I'm actually going to revisit their bail statute in New York, that they have to do this with him having already been denied bail. It's not like they're dismissing certain charges; they're only adding charges.
Yeah, Lisa, and hey, what's up, Lisa? Congratulations on your nuptials. I haven't seen you since you got freshly married. I'm very excited for you. Yeah, no, for certain. Like I was talking about that the other day, like that exact concept that they need to be cross-referencing, which I'm sure that they are. Every time that they know either Rex was out of town, and we know that they're doing it in Nevada. We're still awaiting some DNA results out there. We know they went down to where his brother lives. I believe it was South Carolina. And they were conducting a pretty heavy search there, but they're putting all that together in terms of every time that they know that Asa was gone with the kids and he had the whole house to himself. and cross matching that with NamUs. Like, but they could definitely be doing that before they get the DNA, just to see if they can get, okay, like here's a 3-day window when she's gone. Boom. This is people in the area, the larger area that went missing, So I'm sure they're doing that. Like when we get through this thing, you'll see, in stark contrast to some of the probable cause affidavits that we've seen in recent cases, this thing is, this is what you hope to see in terms of a case being built against somebody. I'll just leave that at that. So on July 14th of 2023, defendant Rex Heuermann was charged by a grand jury with the following 6 counts, which have been incorporated in Suffolk County Indictment 71889-23, murder in the first degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, Section 12527, a Class A1 violent felony for the death of Melissa Bartholomew on or about July 10th of 2009. Murder in the first in violation of New York State Penal, Class A1 violent felony for the death of Megan Waterman on or about June 6th of 2010. Murder in the first, Class A1 felony, violent felony for the death of Amber Costello on or about September 2nd of 2010. Murder in the second degree, a Class A1 violent felony for the death of Melissa Bartholomew on or about July 10th of 2009.
Babe, the title is is it superseding, amended, or just bail
This is a
application?
bail application.
So
That's
it's just bail, not supersede. I was just wondering if there
no,
was
well, the indictment, they went and got a grand jury indictment, so that's a superseding indictment, obviously. So, but that's what I'm saying. This is a bail application. They do it differently in New York.
No, and I get that. I just was still trying to wrap my mind around why, if he was already denied bail, but if there's a superseding indictment, then maybe technically they need to do it again.
Yeah, here's what I want you to be looking up while I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're going to notice that there's murder in the first degree. Okay,
And I did look at this, so when we get to the end, we can talk about it. The
because people are
difference
going to
between
ask why certain charges have only been murder in the second degree. So I just wanted you to be prepared to answer it. Okay, so murder in the second degree, a Class A1 violent felony for the death of Megan Waterman on or about June 6th of 2010, and murder in the second degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, an A1 violent felony for the death of Amber Costello, again on September 2nd of 2010. On January 16th of 2024, Rex Heuermann was charged by the grand jury in a superseding indictment, Suffolk County Indictment 7012624, which incorporated not only the above counts, but the additional charge of murder in the second degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, a Class A1 violent felony for the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes on or about July 9th of 2007. Today, defendant Rex Heuermann stands before this court charged by the grand jury in another superseding indictment, which incorporates each and every one of the above counts, as well as the additional charges of murder in the second degree, in violation of the New York State Penal Law, Section 125.251, a Class A1 violent felony for the death of Jessica Taylor on or about July 21st through the 26th of 2003, and murder in the second degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, Section 125.212, a Class A1 violent felony for the death of Sandra Costilla on or about November 19th through the 20th, 1993. The people file a written bail application at Rex A. Heuermann's initial arraignment, which occurred on July 14th of 2023, as well as at defendant's arraignment on the initial superseding indictment, which occurred on January 16, 2024. Those applications are annexed here too as Exhibit A. On July 14th of 2023, the Honorable Richard Ambro ordered the defendant Rex A. Heuermann be remanded without bail. The matter was subsequently adjourned to August 1st, 2023, before the Honorable Timothy P. Mazzei, on August 1st of 2023, and in the ensuing appearances that have followed, this court has continued to remand the defendant without bail. Set forth is the People's Bail Application in support of the new superseding indictment, which will expand on additional evidentiary developments in this investigation, now charging defendant Heuermann with the murders of 2 additional victims, Jessica Taylor and Sandra Castilla. Based on defendant Heuermann's indictment on additional murder charges as it pertains to now a 5th and 6th victim, the serious and heinous nature of these serial murders, the planning and forethought that went into these crimes, the strength of the people's case, the length of incarceration the defendant faces upon conviction, the extended period of time that this defendant was able to avoid apprehension, and the remaining facts set forth herein and contained within Exhibit A, the people remain steadfast that the only means to ensure the defendant Rex A. Heuermann's return to court is to remand him without bail. The 2003 and 2011 discovery of the human remains of Jessica Taylor. I'm going to give another trigger warning because now we're getting to the stuff. On or about July 26, 2003, an individual whose identity is known to law enforcement hereinafter as Witness 1 was walking his or her dog just west of Halsey Manor Road in Manorville, Suffolk County, New York. At that time, Witness 1 observed what appeared to be human remains, which prompted him to call 911. Upon arrival, members of the Suffolk County Police Department observed the remains of a female, later identified as Jessica Taylor. I'm going to give you another trigger warning here. This is brutal. Miss Taylor was found lying on her back with her legs bent underneath her. Notably, the victim was decapitated, and both of Miss Taylor's arms had been severed from her body below her elbows. Moreover, a tattoo on the victim's torso. Jeez. Had been severely, geez. Can you pick it up for a second and read for a second?
Yeah. Miss Taylor's arms had been, you read that already? Severed from her body below the elbows. Moreover, a tattoo on the victim's torso had been severely obliterated by a sharp object. Investigators believe oh my God, I can't even speak. The mutilation of the victim's tattoo, decapitation of her head, and dismemberment of Miss Taylor's arms were acts perpetrated by Rex A. Heuermann to, inter alia, inhibit the identification of the victim via facial recognition, fingerprints, and/or tattoo identification. During the initial investigation in Manorville in 2003, the victim's head, arms, and hands were not found at the scene, and their location remained unknown to law enforcement for approximately 8 years. On March 29th, 2011, Miss Taylor's skull, hands, and forearm were discovered along Ocean Parkway just east of Giglio Beach, Suffolk County, New York. Gilgo. Notably, Miss Taylor's remains were located on the same side of the road from where Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthélemy, I don't want to say people's names wrong, Barthélemy, and Megan Waterman and Amber Castillo, hereinafter, right? Costello, not Castillo.
No, okay. the new, just exactly Costello. As it reads. It's Costello, yeah.
Okay. Hereinafter the Gilgo 4. Hereinafter the Gilgo 4 had been found just several months prior in December of 2010. Each of the Gilgo 4 victims, as well as the skull, hands, and forearm of Miss Taylor, were removed on the same side of the road and at a depth of within 50 feet from the edge of the parkway. Furthermore, Taylor's remains were located less than a mile from Gilgo 4, from where the Gilgo 4 were discovered. See embedded images on the following page.
All right, so these are the locations of Jessica Taylor, Maureen, Melissa, Megan, and Amber. As you can see, 2, 3, 4, and 5 were clustered. All right, do you want me to try to pick it up?
Sure. And I just figured to break up some of this, I can just tell you as to the first 4, they charged both first and second degree, and we'll explain it more later. But just in case it was decided that they couldn't prove one of the other first degree murders, they couldn't really have a standalone first degree in New York. So that was sort of backup. But as you'll see, the newer victims, they could only charge second degree, and we can explain that later.
All right. Jessica was last seen on or about July 19th of 2003 in New York City. The investigation to date has established that in July of 2003, Miss Taylor was working as a sex worker in the area of Midtown Manhattan. On July 21st, 2003, at approximately 8:41 p.m., Miss Taylor utilized her cell phone, hereinafter Taylor phone, to speak to her mother. Based on witness interviews and an analysis of telephone records, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has learned that the two spoke for approximately 7 minutes. During that call, Miss Taylor had arranged to visit her mother on July 25th of 2003 in Poughkeepsie, New York, for her mother's birthday. Less than 2 hours later, at approximately 10:22 p.m., the Taylor phone placed an outgoing call, which lasted approximately 2 minutes. Thereafter, the Taylor phone records revealed no further outgoing calls or attempted incoming calls. On or about July 25th of 2003, when her daughter failed to arrive at her Poughkeepsie residence or answer any phone calls, Miss Taylor's mother notified law enforcement. At the time of Miss Taylor's disappearance, Rex Heuermann worked in the same vicinity as where Miss Taylor was known to street walk, i.e., work as a sex worker. Records seized during the execution of prior search warrants reveal Heuermann was in fact present in Midtown Manhattan on July 21, 2003, the same date that Miss Taylor disappeared. On July 26, 2003, and in the days thereafter, members of the Suffolk County Police Department canvassed the area around Halsey Manor Road, Manorville, in the vicinity where Miss Taylor's remains had been found. As a result, investigators spoke to a witness who had, on July 25th, at approximately 10:30 p.m., observed a dark-colored Chevy pickup truck backed into the same wooded area where Miss Taylor's body was later found. Based upon their investigation, law enforcement determined that these observations would have occurred approximately 13 hours before Witness 1's 911 call. Notably, the investigation to date has established that defendant Heuermann purchased a 2002 dark-colored Chevy Avalanche pickup truck on or about March 22nd of 2002 from Ramp Chevrolet in Port Jefferson Station, New York. Accordingly, on July 25, 2003 at 10:30 p.m., defendant Heuermann would have been in possession of a vehicle matching the description of one of the observed in the vicinity of where Miss Taylor's remains had been found on Halsey Manor Road. A forensic analysis of Rex Heuermann's digital devices also revealed the following. 1, that on or about July 28th, 2003, Rex A. Heuermann accessed a Newsday article entitled, quote, "Cops Seek Help in IDing Manorville Body," end quote, regarding the discovery of Miss Taylor's human remains. That online activity was subsequently deleted. And 2, on or about July 29, 2003, Rex A. Heuermann conducted an internet search for a new Chevy Avalanche, despite his 2002 Avalanche just being over 1 year old. See embedded image below. The analysis further shows that Heuermann also attempted to delete this search for a new vehicle. Notably, this activity occurred just days after Miss Taylor was discovered and just days after witnesses observed a vehicle matching the physical description of Heuermann's leaving the scene. So here you've got the purchase receipt. This looks like the actual receipt from his purchase back when he bought the first whip. And you can see it's created on 7/29/2003, access 7/29/2003, and then deleted. This appears to be.
Can you see when? I'm looking at it in this other. When the report, does it say anything about? I'm just wondering when they got all this information, when they got her phone bills, when they got. But
Well, we'll keep going through.
I mean, this document is.
This is data from his. They found this in his temporary internet files, Windows. When we get to the amount of data, it's going to blow your mind. It's going to terrify you. Finally, while the make and model of the vehicle Heuermann searched for is the same as his 2002 vehicle, Chevy Avalanche pickup truck, the exterior color is different, i.e. Arrival blue. See embedded image below, as well as another Summit white, which are significantly brighter exterior paint offerings by Chevrolet when compared to Heuermann's dark green 2000.
Well, I think he's. I specifically told Scarlett she is not allowed in the room while we're going over this material. Obviously.
Yeah, well, she wasn't. Like the sisters are finally getting along, so I'm not that mad. Okay, which are significantly brighter exterior paint offerings by Chevrolet when compared to Heuermann's dark green 2002 Chevy Avalanche. Hairs recovered from the remains of Jessica Taylor. During the course of this investigation, Miss Taylor's body was examined by a forensic scientist within the Suffolk County Crime Lab, which revealed that Miss Taylor had been decapitated, dismembered at her arms, below her elbows, and revealed irregular disruption of victim's nipples and the obliteration of her tattoo. During the examination of Miss Taylor's body, a male human hair was recovered, specifically from a surgical drape that had been underneath the victim. Hereinafter, male hair underneath Taylor. Subsequent examination of the male hair underneath Taylor led to the determination that it was a human head hair with Caucasian European characteristics. However, it was, based on the DNA testing capabilities at the crime lab, unsuitable for further DNA testing at that time. On or about August 24, 2023, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a cutting of the male hair underneath Taylor to an outside forensics laboratory, previously referred to in Exhibit A as Forensic Laboratory Number 2, which specializes in forensic mitochondrial analysis. On or about February 1 of 2024, Forensic Laboratory Number 2 issued a report concluding that the mitochondrial DNA profile developed from the male hair underneath Taylor and the profile developed from the defendant's buccal swab are the same, specifically at a rate that would, as per the EMPOP database, exclude 99.96 of the North American population as the contributor of said hair recovered underneath the decapitated and dismembered remains of Jessica Taylor. While 99.96 of the North American population could be excluded as the contributor of the male hair underneath Taylor, defendant Heuermann cannot be excluded as the contributor of the said hair recovered underneath the remains of Jessica Taylor. On or about March 8th of 2024, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a cutting of the male hair underneath Taylor and a DNA extract of Rex Heuermann's buccal swab to an outside independent laboratory previously referred to as Exhibit A, which applies DNA techniques and direct genome sequencing in difficult-to-solve forensic casework and the identification of human remains. We had a couple of footnotes here. Footnote 1 was witness from the Suffolk County Medical Examiner Office have determined that the irregular disruption of the victim's nipples did not occur naturally. And one possible cause of such disruption is the postmortem mutilation of the victim's nipples. MPOP is short for the European DNA Profile Group, Mitochondrial DNA Population Database, which is a web-based collection of human mitochondrial sequence data from various populations worldwide. The North American database includes 12,386 sequences of North American forensic significance.
And so just a note, I did look at the DNA statute, and New York doesn't allow for collecting of DNA before conviction, but it sounds like you said they used a pizza or something like that. So it's clear they were still able to run it, even though he hasn't been convicted. But they would not have been able to force his, get it like with a warrant, as opposed to him kind of just leaving it out.
Yeah,
I guess, or they don't collect it and store it like they do in other places when you're arrested. They only do that after you're charged in New York, but there's workarounds.
All right. On or about April 29, 2024, Forensic Laboratory Number 1 issued a report indicating it had developed a nuclear DNA profile for not only the male hair underneath Taylor, but also from Rex Heuermann's buccal swab. Forensic Lab 1 was then able to conduct a 1-to-1 autosomal nuclear DNA comparison between said profile developed from the male hair underneath Taylor to Rex Heuermann's SNP genotype file developed from his buccal swab, which resulted in the conclusion that the DNA profile generated from the male hair underneath Taylor is 1.837 times 10 to the 603rd power times more likely to have come from a person genetically identical to Rex Heuermann's SNP genotype file than from an unrelated individual.
So they at footnote 1, they say that means it's 1,837 followed by 6 zeros.
600 zeros.
600 zeros. Sorry. Yeah,
It's
6. Wow.
It's a huge number.
Yeah.
It's not a real number.
Yeah.
There's no word for it.
Right.
It's like that, when we'd make up numbers, gazillionaire, like I'm a gazillionaire when you're kids, just making up numbers that are too big that they don't have actual names. All right, based on the foregoing, it is significant that 2 forensic laboratories have now independently determined that the aforementioned hair recovered from the surgical drape underneath the remains of Jessica Taylor are substantially more likely to have derived from a person genetically identical to defendant Heuermann's mitochondrial and nuclear profiles, provides further support that Rex Heuermann murdered, dismembered, decapitated, and transported the remains of Jessica Taylor to Manorville and Gilgo Beach until the victim's remains were ultimately discovered in July 2003 and March of 2011, respectively. Heuermann's family travel in relation to the disappearance of Jessica Taylor. As part of the ongoing investigation, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has also established that Heuermann's wife and children were out of state at the time of Ms. Taylor's disappearance and murder, a consistent theme attributable to the defendant for each of the charged homicides thus far, which would have allowed the defendant unfettered time and opportunity to execute these crimes. Specifically, in 2002-2003, defendant Heuermann's daughter, Victoria, was a kindergarten student at the McKenna Elementary School located in Massapequa, New York, or Massapequa Park, New York. At the time, Victoria was classmates with an individual whose identity is known to law enforcement hereinafter as witness 2. Based on post-arrest interviews with witnesses, including witness 2's family and Victoria Heuermann, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has learned that at the conclusion of the kindergarten school year, Mrs. Ellerup and her 2 children vacationed with the witnesses, 2 families from on or about July 20th, 2003 through on or about July 27th of 2003 at Smuggler's Notch Resort, which is located in Jeffersonville, Vermont. Rex Heuermann did not attend this trip. These witness accounts have been corroborated via telephone records and electronic data seized during the execution of the July 2023 search warrants. For example, agents of the Gilgo Homicide Task Force seized AT&T records which detailed calls made to and from the Heuermann residence in July of 2003. See embedded excerpt on the following page. These records show that during the aforementioned family vacation, the landline telephone associated with the Heuermann residence, which was located at 105 First Avenue, Massapequa Park, New York, hereinafter target residence, made several phone calls to a telephone number bearing an 802 area code. Further investigation has tied this number to Smuggler's Notch Resort. Thus, investigators believe defendant Heuermann made these calls from the target residence in Massapequa Park to his family staying in Jeffersonville, Vermont. Here
I'm
you've got,
assuming that you would think that they had to have gotten this in their first round of records aren't still around from 2003. I didn't think.
what?
I didn't think they could still get those records. I wonder if he was a um suspect before. Like you're not. It seems unusual to get
Wait,
2000.
from landlines? Why do you think that? You don't think they kept that shit?
I guess
Obviously they
from a
did.
landline, yeah,
I
AT&T.
mean, if they had this back then, I mean, they might have. I mean, it's like they didn't have the ability scientifically to test the DNA from that hair that they found back then. It's like you got Othram and Paramount out there, like on next level shit, cracking cases, solving cold cases left and right. I mean, when I went out to Othram, my mind was blown. Like anybody giving that lab shit about being for profit can blow it out their ass because they spend every dime they make sinking it back into technology. It's unbelievable. And both the middlemans are amazing. Like they're just science nerds, man, that are like really care about what they do. And they're doing incredible work. I ran into David at CrimeCon. Well, actually, both of them. They're just really nice people and doing amazing things for victims and cold cases. All right, so this obviously is validating. These are the 3 calls made from the target residence. Scumbag didn't even go on family vacays. What do you think of that, babe?
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, I'm
I
gonna
know that
dip out. I'm gonna dip out on this family vacation. You guys have fun. All
right,
right.
that they decided that's his MO. I know that AT&T says like for a regular person, they go back 7 years. So it'll be interesting to know when they got these, or maybe they've got something special for law enforcement. But most of what we've been dealing with in the past, I can't even think how many years are all cell records. So I don't know if there's something different with landlines that allow them to go back, even though they don't, you know, indicate that they maintain it over 7 years.
Yeah. All right. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force also seized phone records attributable to Heuermann's Manhattan business, RH Consultants and Associates. These records further corroborate Heuermann's stay in New York and the family's travel to Jeffersonville, Vermont, as Heuermann's work landline makes numerous calls during the same week of July 20th through the 27th, 2003, from Manhattan, New York to Smuggler's Notch Resort. See embedded image below. So you got his business name there, and you've got, looks like 5 phone calls consisting of no longer
Oh, well,
3.
then those they could have in files, all their old business account records,
But
phone
clearly
records.
they have the landline too. I mean,
Right.
I see what you're saying. Like if he was on the radar like that back then,
Right.
that's like you had him.
Right. But, they could keep their phone records, they could have had those in tax paperwork's files from, since it's his business phone records.
All right, well, let's keep plowing through. This thing's pretty detailed. It's probably going to give us a lot of the answers. Finally, in July 2023, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force seized a hard drive from the basement of the target residence. An extraction and analysis of that hard drive revealed that it contained a Palm Pilot backup file,
Wow.
which
We're
appeared to
going way back.
contain. They're not fucking around, man.
No.
When I was talking about the stark contrast of the investigation in this case as to some of the other ones that we're seeing and some that we cover,
Well,
it's stunning. And this is what I want to see. This kind of investigation. An extraction and analysis of that hard drive revealed that it contained a Palm Pilot backup file, which appeared to contain defendant Heuermann's date book or calendar for the relevant dates. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force subsequently hired a digital forensics expert who, by utilizing native Palm software, was able to convert the above data into a readable format. Date book for Heuermann R. So here's the relevant dates. 8 to 9, wife in Vermont at Smugs. And that's on the 7/20 of 2003. Again, same entry on 7/21, same entry on the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th. Based on the foregoing, the investigation to date has clearly established that defendant Heuermann's wife and children were indeed located out of state during the time of Jessica Taylor's disappearance, which occurred on or about July 21 of 2003. Accordingly, the murderers of all 4 charged victims, and now the murder of Miss Taylor, occurred at times when the defendant Heuermann's wife and children were located out of state, which would have allowed defendant Heuermann unfettered time to execute his plan for Miss Taylor, which included the decapitation, dismemberment, and transportation of her remains, without any fear that his family would uncover or learn of his involvement in these crimes. We're going to move on to Sandra Castilla. The 1993 discovery of human remains of Sandra Castilla. On or about November 20th of 1993, 2 individuals, while hunting in a wooded area of Southampton in the vicinity of 50 Old Fish Cove Road, North Sea, Suffolk County, New York, discovered the remains of Sandra Castilla, date of birth 8/25/1965. The victim, who had been 28 years old at the time, was lying on her back with her arms outstretched over her head and with uncovered legs spread apart. The victim's shirt had been pulled up over her torso and head, exposing the victim's breasts. The victim had numerous sharp force injuries to inter alia, her face, torso, breast, left thigh, and vaginal area. Miss Castilla was a native of Trinidad and Tobago, which had been living in New York prior to her disappearance and murder. Hairs recovered from the remains of Sandra Castilla. During the course of the 1993 investigation, Miss Castilla's body was examined by a forensic scientist with the SCCL, which led to the discovery of inter alia 3 hairs from the victim's remains. 1 from the victim's right arm, hereinafter female hair on Castilla. 1 from the tape lift of the striped shirt above the victim's head, hereinafter male hair on Castilla, as well as 1 from the tape lift of the white shirt above the victim's head, hereinafter unidentified female hair on Castilla, collectively hairs on Castilla. In 2014, well before the identification of Rex Heuermann as a suspect in Miss Castilla's murder, the hairs on Castilla were sent to Forensic Laboratory Number 2, which was able to develop a unique mitochondrial DNA profiles for each of the hairs on Castilla. On or about August 1 of 2014, Forensic Lab 2 received an extract of John Bittrolf's buccal swab. Forensic Laboratory Number 2 was then able to develop a mitochondrial DNA profile from John Bittrolf's buccal swab and subsequently compared it to the mitochondrial DNA profiles that had been previously generated on each of the hairs on Castilla. At the conclusion of its analysis, Forensic Laboratory Number 2 was able to exclude John Bittrolf, and I'm not sure if I'm saying that, Bittrolf, and his maternal relatives as a contributor on the hairs of Castilla. Recently, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force requested Forensic Laboratory Number 2 to undergo forensic testing, specifically comparing mitochondrial DNA profiles for each of the hairs on Castilla, which had been developed back in 2014 prior to Heuermann emerging as a suspect in the Miss Castilla murder. to known samples provided by the Gilgo Homicide Task Force. On or about February 29th of 2024, Forensic Laboratory Number 2 issued a report concluding that the mitochondrial DNA profile developed from the male hair on Castilla and profile developed from the defendant's buccal swab are the same, specifically at a rate that would, as per the EMPOP database, exclude 99.96 of the North American population as the contributor of the aforementioned hair recovered on the mutilated remains of Sandra Castilla. Based on the foregoing, while 99.96 of the North American population can be excluded as a contributor of the male hair on Castilla, defendant Heuermann cannot be excluded as the contributor of the male hair on Castilla. Prior to Ms. Castilla's disappearance and murder, defendant Heuermann had been living with a female individual whose identity is known to law enforcement hereinafter as Witness 3. During the course of this investigation, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force was able to secure a buccal swab from Witness 3, which was secured via her consent. On or about March 29th of 2024, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a DNA extract of Witness 3's buccal swab to Forensic Laboratory Number 2 for further analysis. On or about May 8th. Do you call it buccal or buccal?
We did this before.
I know. I've heard both are correct.
Buckle.
You call it a buckle? I asked Middleman when I was there. I always like to ask, like,
buccal?
I can't remember what he said. I remember at the time. I don't remember there being like a conversation like, oh, that's the way I pronounce it all the time. All right. Forensic Laboratory Number 2 issued a report concluding the mitochondrial DNA profile developed from Witness 3's buccal swab and the profile developed from the female hair on Castilla share a common base at all compared positions, specifically at a rate that would, as per the MPOP database, exclude 99.98 of the North American population as the contributor of said hair recovered on the mutilated remains of Sandra Castilla, while 99.98 of the North American population can be excluded as a contributor of the female hair on Castilla. Witness Number 3, who had but no longer resided at target residence prior to Ms. Castilla's disappearance and murder, cannot be excluded as the contributor of said hair recovered on Ms. Castilla. On or about March 8th of 2024, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a cutting of the hairs on Castilla, as well as the DNA extract of the Witness 3's buccal swab, to the Forensic Laboratory Number 1 for further independent analysis. On or about April 29th of 2024, the Forensic Lab 1 issued a report indicating its inability to develop a nuclear DNA profile for the male hair on Castilla. Forensic Lab 1 was then able to conduct a 1-to-1 autosomal nuclear DNA comparison between said profile developed from the male hair on Castilla to Rex Heuermann SNP genotype file developed from his buccal swab, which resulted in a conclusion that the DNA profile generated from the male hair on Castilla, which was recovered from Ms. Castilla's mutilated remains, is 4.347 times 10 to the 332nd power times more likely to have come from a person genetically identified to Rex Heuermann's SMP genotype file than from an unrelated individual. And then we'll get to that footnote down there. Forensic Lab 1 was also able to generate nuclear DNA profiles from not only the extract of Witness 3's buccal swab, but also the female hair on Castilla. Forensic Laboratory Number 1 was then able to conduct a 1-to-1 autosomal nuclear DNA comparison between said profile developed from Witness 3's buccal swab to the SMP genotype file developed from the female hair on Castilla, which resulted in the conclusion that DNA profile generated from the female hair on Castilla is 4.578 times 10 to the 1040th times more likely power, more likely to have come from a person genetically identical to Witness 3's SMP genotype than from an individual, unrelated individual. I mean, it's like a number that doesn't even exist. It's that big. It's that big of a number. Based on the foregoing, it is significant that 2 forensic laboratories have now independently determined that male hair recovered from the mutilated remains of Sandra Castilla is substantially more likely to have derived from a person genetically identical to the defendant, male Heuermann's mitochondrial and nuclear profiles. Additionally, both laboratories were also able to forensically tie witness 3, who had resided at target residence prior to Miss Castilla's disappearance and murder, to the female hair recovered on Miss Castilla's remains. The foregoing provides further support that Rex Heuermann mutilated, murdered, and transported the body of Sandra Castilla to Southampton. The chart below summarizes the results from the forensic laboratory number 1 and forensic laboratory number 2, which each individually have been able to determine that the hairs recovered on now 5 of the 6 charged victims are forensically tied to the defendant Heuermann, member of his immediate families, or individuals with whom Heuermann resided, lending further support. And these are the breakdowns. So you get the 329 zeros and 1,037 zeros. I mean, they're just numbers that don't exist in the world. Lending further support to the conclusion that defendant Heuermann is the individual who murdered, stripped, restrained, and transported the remains of Jessica Taylor and Sandra Castilla, as well as the Gilgo Four, until they were each discovered in 1993, 2003, 2010, and 2011. All right, this is you. I don't know what are you sleeping? That's what everybody says when I'm texting or tweeting. Are you sleeping? Bob's asleep. Were you asleep?
No. So you want me to tell you about the statute,
Medication time,
about the
wake
first
up.
and second, or is that what
Yeah,
you're
you
talking
wanna
about?
I mean, you wanna talk about any of this DNA stuff? Like, you're the DNA gal.
I mean, it sounds like they've got pretty strong they've got pretty strong DNA, and without us having, like, the profiles, there's not much, like, there's not much I can say. I'm trying to look at it, it's hard to look at it on that thing. Um, but they're saying that 99.8 can be excluded, but with just this, sure, it looks like super strong, DNA. It looks like insanely strong DNA, but until we see the profiles and know what was really compared and, were there multiple contributors and did it have to get amplified and how many times, there's no attacking it. But on the face of it, obviously, this is very strong, you know,
It's beyond
DNA in it.
strong. Like, this is either gonna be Parabon or Othram. And Othram, like, flat out, I mean, we were asking them the hard questions in there. They are not true allele.
That's what I was
They
gonna say. Hopefully, it's not true
they're
allele
the
because then we might
diametric opposite. They are completely
throw it all out.
transparent. They don't, like, they whatever anybody needs, they give it to them. They're that lab that will tell you that, like, up front, if they think that they can develop, if they're going to be able to develop profile, and they'll never do anything without obviously asking, like, look, we're going to consume all the DNA if we do this. But they can do it from such a, like, they're a different level of lab. Like, they're like the future, like space lab. They're so far ahead of the game. And it's because they invest their money back into their labs and their science. I mean, all right. Yes, it's all right. So Heuermann's unfettered access to target residence during the disappearance and murder of Miss Sandra Castilla, as noted supra, which means above, based on the post-arrest interviews, the witnesses, Gilgo Homicide Task Force has learned that witnesses 3, defendant Heuermann, began living together at target residence in 1991. In September of 1993, approximately 2 months before Miss Castilla's disappearance and murder, witness 3 moved out of the target residence. Prior to witness 3 leaving the target residence, Heuermann's mother had moved out of the target residence. Based on the foregoing, neither Heuermann's mother nor witness 3 were living at the target residence during the time of Sandra Castilla's murder. Accordingly, the murders of all 4 charged victims, and now the murders of Miss Taylor and Miss Castilla, occurred at times when defendant Heuermann would have had unfettered time to execute his plans for each victim without any fear that his family or others residing at target residence would uncover or learn of his involvement in these crimes. Newly discovered digital evidence. As detailed in Exhibit A, following Heuermann's arrest, numerous search warrants were executed at a target residence, which culminated in an inter alia, the seizure over 350. Where is she? 350 electronic devices. It's like that. 350 electronic devices. Good God, man. In the months subsequent to Heuermann's arrest, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has attempted to extract and analyze data from each of these devices. An analysis of these devices has revealed Heuermann's significant collection of violent bondage and torture pornography dating back to 1994. The pornographic images accessed by Heuermann include, but are not limited to, breast mutilation, vaginal torture, sex substitution, penetration with an object, the sexualization of decapitated women, bondage, and whipping, which notably and largely coincide with how the remains of Sandra Castilla, Jessica Taylor, and Valerie Mack were discovered. Moreover, during the analysis of a hard drive recovered from the basement of Heuermann's residence, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force recently discovered a Microsoft Word document entitled HK 2002 through 2004. The document was discovered in, quote, an unallocated space, end quote. All right, so they got 350 devices on the search. 350 electronic devices.
I was just thinking that this was going to be something that you get to. And I mean, obviously, this is the kind of thing that you expect. Obviously, this is an extreme case. It's an active serial killer who's been killing since at least 1993, but you're expecting to see perverse, search history and activity. And
yeah, it's bad. It's so bad that I think I'm going to probably turn off the monetization on this thing. On the other hand, unallocated space refers to available or unstructured data, which is not readily available and able to be opened by a user. Unallocated space frequently contains room for the new data or old data that has been deleted, sent to the recycle bin, overwritten, etc. For example, when a user deletes data, many users believe the file has been purged forever. However, deleting a file only tells the computer that the space previously occupied by that file is now available. The deleted data will remain in unallocated space until another file is written over in it or is written over it. Data contained within unallocated space can be retrieved via a computer forensic extraction method called file carving. A forensic analysis of the HK 2002-4 document reveals that it was not only a locally created draft, i.e. not downloaded from the internet, but also recovered from the hard drive that indicates that it was utilized by Heuermann himself. While the original document appears to have been created in 2000, based on its original title, HK 2000 through 2003, this iteration of the Word document titled HK 2002 through 2004 appears to have been created and modified between 2001 and 2002. Based on the foregoing and the facts set forth infra, the task force members believe 2000 or 2002 to be referenced calendar years. The task force members also believe, based on the foregoing and the facts set forth infra, that Microsoft Word document to be a planning document utilized by Heuermann to methodically blueprint and plan out his kills, hereinafter referred to as HK planning document. Attached here to is Exhibit B. The HK planning documents begin with a four-category section with the underlined headings of problems, supplies, DS, and TRG. See embedded excerpt on the following page. All right, so this is his handbook,
his little manifesto.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not a manifesto as much as it's like his how-to. How so problems, potential problems, DNA, tire marks, bloodstains, fingerprints, MO, plastic bag, cat litter. Witness, trace source of supplies, foot shoe prints, photos, misleaders, police stop, truck stuck, fingerprints in gloves, plastic bag matched to box, hair and fiber. Boy, hair and fiber mixed down there pretty low. And that's what he left on 5 of the 6. Supplies, booties, lye, and acid. Gacy used lye. Police scanner, rope, cord, saw, cutting tools, hairnet, photo film, burn can, foam drain cleaner, body wash wipes, tarps. What a fucking sick motherfucker, man. I mean, I just can't. Can you imagine like sitting around like probably constantly and this is what's going through your mind? I mean, it's like unfathomable. It's in, oh my God. This guy's thinking about this shit like we're thinking about holding the baby.
Yeah, and it's got to make them start to rethink all of the while the dog's really yelling at me, it's getting excessive. Rethink their, position about serial killers sticking with one race. I mean, he's here.
Well, his MO changed entirely. I mean, we know from Taylor where he dismembered the body. I mean, that does not remain his MO as he proceeds. Like he evolves. This guy's been active for decades.
Right.
Literally. I mean, I graduated high school in 88. And decades. I mean, it's hard to like think about what could be here. Like, honestly.
Come on. What is it that you need?
So, tarps, drop cloths, medical gloves, bag tape, large electrical clips, ratchet cargo strap, dump site, that's DS, Mill Road 2, ? Dumpster site, next time recon, dumpster look at. Man. All right. Based on the Gilgo Homicide Task Force training experience, the members believe problems to be a guide on issues to avoid apprehension, supplies to be a reference to what supplies are needed to carry out the serial murders to avoid apprehension and to avoid leaving behind DNA evidence. The DS appears to be an acronym for dump site, which is corroborated by inter alia the discoveries of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor at 2 separate dump sites, i.e. the vicinity of Mill Road and Ocean Parkway, under that same heading. And footnote 6 here is no alterations other than the addition of call-out boxes where applicable have been made to the excerpts of HK planning document. The document is portrayed in the same manner that it was recovered from an unallocated space with no changes in formatting or spelling. So under that same heading, is a note regarding dumpster sites, which the task force members believe is reference to how Heuermann disposed of physical evidence in the manner described infra. See dispose of the following section below. TRG appears to be a reference to a target or a victim. See embedded image below. It is important to note that known victims thus far are all petite women, which is consistent with the small is good entry in the document, lending further support to the aforementioned conclusion that TRG refers to victims or targets. With regard to DS section of the document, it's important to note that the human remains of Jessica Taylor discovered in 2003, as well as the remains of Valerie Mack discovered in 2000, were dumped in 2 locations, One of those locations being the vicinity of Mill Road, which is listed as DS1 Mill Road in the above Word document. On March 29, 2011, Ms. Taylor's torso, skull, and hands recovered near Ocean Parkway, i.e. a second dump site. On April 4th of 2011, Ms. Mack's skull and hands and right foot were recovered near Ocean Parkway, also a second dump site. The recent discovery of this document prompted the April 2024 cadaver search of the Manorville area, which did not yield the recovery of additional sets of human remains, thereby reinforcing the task force members' belief that HK planning documents refer to Heuermann's preparations for either Jessica Taylor and or Valerie Mack. The HK planning document on Heuermann's computer then delves into a 3-category section with the headings pre-prep, prep, and post-event. So pre-prep vehicle inspection, engage T1, recon DS1, locate DS2, weather report, recon video cameras, recon pick zone for video cameras, prep setup stage, holding area, build table, crossbar, hard point.
Well, just talking about the pre-prep, he doesn't want to get pulled over, so he's got to get his vehicle inspected.
Right.
And then what's
they'll go through they'll go through
okay.
what their translation of what they think it is. So post-event destroy file, change tires in italics, burn gloves, dispose of pics, have story set. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe pre-prep to be a guide on steps to take in advance of a homicide, i.e. inspecting his vehicle, engaging the target, conducting a recon or survey of video surveillance cameras in pertinent areas, including the pick zone, location where a victim is picked up, and checking the weather to ensure for optimal conditions. Prep, on the other hand, appears to be a reference to steps taken closer in time to homicide, i.e. setting up the staging area, holding area, and or table cross barred hard point for the victim. Specifically, the prep section has 5 entries: setup, stage, holding area, build table, crossbar, and hard point. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force members are aware that a crossbar is often placed underneath tables to provide further structural support for heavier objects being placed on a table. Additionally, the task force members are also made aware that a hard point refers in the field of sexual a suspension bondage. So recon is commonly utilized in shorthand as a word for reconnaissance, which means to survey or research a specific area in order to ascertain particular strategic features. My aunt was giving me the hiccups. All right, so suspension bondage to a fixed attachment point in the ceiling that supports the weight of an individual being suspended off of the ground, which is corroborated by Heuermann's significant interest in pornography, where the subject is either suspended, tortured, or bound to a table, decapitated, and or the breasts are mutilated, which is consistent with the foregoing notations regarding suspension, as well as the conditions of the victims described herein. Additionally, post-event appears to reference a checklist of tasks following the event or homicide to avoid apprehension: destroy sick file, change tires, burn gloves, dispose of pics taken to the victim, and to have a story set, e.g. alibi story for family upon their return or law enforcement should an inquiry be made. The HK planning documents continue to further expound on preparatory measures such as specific recon steps taken, see recon reports and takedown pickup, packaging a body for transport, see body prep section embedded below, and steps to inhibit victim identification and avoid leaving behind DNA evidence. So recon reports. So he's got vid cameras on Long Island Expressway, Route 112 to Route 110. I think that's what RT stands for, equals 33 old. vid cameras on SS Parkway, Route 231 to exit 30, 10 old. T1 info cell, beeper voicemail, old. Takedown pickup, hunt too long, seen an area too long. Remember, don't charge gas. Recon for vid cameras and pickup area next time. Body prep. Wash body inside and all cavities. Remove trace evidence. Fingerprints and hair. Remove DNA. Trace DNA. Remove ID marks, tattoos and marks. Remove marks from torture. Ugh. Remove head and hands. Package for transport. Oh my God. Dispose of the following: tools and devices, T1 clothes and personal items, drop clothes, wipes and towels, props, toys, wood items, anything that touched T1, what you wore, destroy books, destroy book and computer files, burn gloves, dispose of box of plastic BAs to avoid trace. The body prep section includes a note to remove the head and the hands, which clearly relates to the condition of Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack's remains, as both victims were decapitated and dismembered at their arms below their elbows. Additionally, each of these victims' remains, as well as the remains of the Gilgo Four, were indeed packaged for transport, as this section indicates, to do, further increasing the significance of this document's presence on Heuermann's laptop computer. Finally, this section also includes a note to remove ID marks, tattoos, as noted supra. The examination of Ms. Taylor's body in July of 2003 indicated numerous sharp linear injuries to the victim's skin, specifically around where Ms. Taylor's tattoo had been located, which investigators believe was intended to inhibit the identification of Ms. Taylor's tattoo and therefore Ms. Taylor in a manner consistent with the HK planning document. Further, the dispose of the following section lists destroy sick computer files as a checklist item. The presence of this HK planning document in unallocated space demonstrates Heuermann's effort to destroy or delete computer files in a manner that is consistent with this notation. As set forth in Exhibit A, a consistent theme of Heuermann's computer activity is the use of forensic wiping software, inter alia, in a manner that is consistent with this notation in the HK planning document. In the things to remember section, there are notes indicating steps to take, quote, next time, i.e. considering a hit to the face or neck, quote, next time, or using heavier rope for the neck as the, quote, light rope broke under stress of being tightened. Oh my God. Heuermann further opines on the importance of sleep to not only avoid problems, but also to increase what Heuermann refers to as playtime. Things to remember.
I think there's going to be an insane amount of victims. There's probably so many people who have been convicted of this guy's crimes. It's,
oh my God. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, this is the most significant arrest in a long, long time.
right.
This guy's a fucking monster, man. Oh, this is a
It's
hard read, man.
possible that there was that many monsters in the 70s, right? Like that then what? They all just, people stopped, thinking this way. They stopped making people like that. I mean, I guess they just got smarter. They probably have their own little underground, like, communication network where it seems odd. We're talking like 2003, and he already, unless he's really, really reading old books that deal with like forensic stuff, like the internet's not been around all that long. I mean, this kind of stuff has to come from a lot of experience.
Things to remember. Sound travels, i.e. a bird outside. Control the amount of air in and out to control the noise made. Get sleep before hunt. Too tired creates problems. Hit harder. Too many hit to take down. Consider a hit to the face or the neck next time for takedown. More sleep and noise control equals more playtime. Use push pins to hang drop clothes from ceiling, not tape. Use heavy rope for neck light rope broke under stress of being tightened.
Right, so he's like, "They used tape before, he did this before, he got clearly one time he forgot and he got gas." I mean, he kept everything.
I mean, he's talking about sound travel, so control the amount of air in and out to control the noise made. I mean, he's talking about the house.
Or wherever he was.
The house is set forth above the embedded here below. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe these references to next time indicate Heuermann's prior experiences and what changes to implement moving forward. Takedown, pickup, hunt too long, seen in area too long. Remember, don't charge gas, recon for vid cameras and pickup area next time. Moreover, the references in the things to remember section to utilize push pins to hang drop clothes sick from the ceiling and not tape, as well as manifested concerns regarding sound travel, indicate the referenced incidents would have occurred indoors and likely inside of the target residence, which is a controlled environment that Heuermann would not only be familiar with, but also an area where Heuermann would have access to said tools and supplies. Drop cloths would also serve the twin purposes of limiting the spread of forensic evidence, such as blood, to a confined area, as well as controlling sound travel, which would lead to, quote, mode playtime, end quote, which is believed to be a reference to sexual mutilation acts perpetrated on victims. Additionally, with Heuermann's family vacationing out of state, defendant would have unfettered time and exclusive access to the target residence, allowing defendant Heuermann ample opportunity to execute and clean up after these crimes. Finally, the HK planning document on Heuermann's laptop includes a notes section. Notes, spur of the moment, cover Stockholm Syndrome. The more you do, the more clues you give. Look at the painting. What, why, who. Organized versus disorganized. Page 162, sex substitution. Page 163. Page 175, mutilation equals disorganized. The investigation to date has established the source of these notes, i.e. the Mindhunter paperback book authored by John Douglas, specifically the first edition published in 1996.
Okay.
Concerning the criminal profiling of serial killers. John Douglas spoke at CrimeCon. For example, the notes section of the HK planning document include the following notation. Page 162, sex substitution, page 163. Page 162 of said book does indeed reference sex substitution, i.e. penetration with an object, as Douglas describes the, quote, rather horrible sexual mutilation and masturbation over the victim's body, but no intercourse. The penetration with the umbrella and the pens were acts of sexual substitution. On 163, Douglas opines that the perpetrators of such a crime, i.e. the sex substitution, would be a disorganized killer who would be compulsive and perhaps living with his parents. Accordingly, this notation contained in the HK planning document is consistent with the aforementioned book in the page number and subject matter. Footnote 8, John Douglas is a retired special agent and profile from the FBI who spent over 25 years in the FBI's behavioral analysis unit. During his time with the FBI, Douglas interviewed over a dozen serial killers and other violent sexual offenders, which led to numerous publications, including the Mindhunter book. The notes section of the HK planning document also includes the following notation. Page 175, mutilation equals disorganized. It's pretty scary to think that Douglas's book was a handbook. In page 175 of the first edition Mindhunter book, Douglas describes a woman's screams and shortly thereafter how the woman's throat had been cut and her naked body mutilated. Douglas further asserts on page 175 of the said book that mutilation is a sign of disorganized personality type. Accordingly, this notation contained in the HK planning document, and again is consistent with the aforementioned book and page number and subject matter. The notes section of the HK planning document also contains the following notation. Look at the painting, in quotes. What, why, and who. On page 19 of said book, Douglas notes that while he was still at the FBI, he always advised his agents, quote, if you want to understand the artist, the perpetrator, you have to look at the painting, the victim. We've looked at many paintings over the years and talked extensively to the most accomplished artists. Accordingly, the note above contained in Heuermann's laptop computer to look at the painting yet again points to the aforementioned book as a source of Heuermann's commentary. Finally, the other notations contained in the HK planning document, i.e. spur-of-the-moment cover, Stockholm Syndrome, which is footnote 9. Stockholm Syndrome is a psychological condition that explains why victims or hostages can sometimes develop a psychological bond or empathy for their captor or abuser. The more you do, the more clues you give are also contained in said book, all pointing to it as the source of Heuermann's notations.
So do you think because of this that this guy is going to think, like when you think about Mindhunter and like they wanted to interview all the serial killers and they wanted to try and figure them out so that they could know the mentality that he's going to think like that he's going to be able to become like this, I don't know, like they're going to want to study him and he's going to have people coming to interview him and like he's probably got, who knows, this what he is going to use this, process for. Like clearly the evidence is, strong against him, but
think?
well, I mean, I don't know if he would want to go to trial because of the, just like the notoriety around it, like the, whatever from it, or
well, Carrie's not in here, but I mean, we had some talks with Carrie at CrimeCon, Carrie Rawson, whose dad was obviously BTK. I mean, like these guys, like it's like you and I, like I don't know if I was having this conversation with you at CrimeCon or somebody else. I'm like, like the hope is, like, if this guy has any semblance of humanity, once he's convicted of these, that if he's got any humanity, which I highly doubt,
right,
that he'll give these families some sense of closure.
Oh God,
and just
can't
indicate.
imagine that.
I can't imagine it either. They're like Gacy.
I think he'd want to use it so so that he could be studied like they studied the people in Mindhunters.
Lisa, I mean, I think it's the best lab on the planet. So I'd be surprised if they didn't, to be honest with you, if they didn't use Othram. The foregoing is corroborated in part by Heuermann's possession of other serial killer books authored by John Douglas. During the initial search warrant execution in July of 2023, I mean, it's like it's scary to think that these guys use these books as handbooks,
But they might be able to use what they know, that he's like obsessed with that, and again thinking that that might lead to like him sort of having a thirst for like letting people want to talk to him and want to study him, that they could use it as a way to get more information. Like if you send us some bodies, direct us to someone, give us something real, maybe they'll be able to entice him with his own fantasy of being studied. I don't know.
Or make the book.
Right.
You'll make the book. During the initial search warrant execution in July of 2023, the target residence, the task force observed that Heuermann possessed in his home office the book entitled The Cases That Haunt Us, which outlines the facts, evidence, and victimology of several notable serial murder cases. So you got the book, Jack the Ripper, John Bonet. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe that the totality of the circumstances surrounding the HK planning document include Heuermann's attempt to delete its existence, point points to it as Heuermann's self-education and homework on the topic of carrying out serial sexual murder. Heuermann's pointed concerns regarding avoiding being captured on video surveillance. 2, leaving behind forensic evidence. 3, what supplies to purchase. 4, how to package a body for subsequent transportation to dump sites, e.g., wash the body inside and all cavities prior to, quote, package for transport. 5, avoid a paper trail tying them to crimes and or crime scenes, e.g., remember, don't charge gas. 6, concerns regarding noise and or air travel, which could inhibit, quote, playtime, end quote. And 7, how to, quote, improve and next time, end quote. Further confirmed merely by looking within the 4 corners of the document itself, its relevance in this regard. This belief is further corroborated when looking at a litany of external factors, including inter alia, how the 6 victims now attributable to Heuermann were indeed packaged and transported. In the case of Mrs. Taylor, our head, hands, and tattoo were removed and or obliterated consistent with the document's instructions. Furthermore, an analysis of Heuermann's computers confirmed that the HK planning document was in, quote, unallocated space and hence been deleted, which is consistent with only the destroy sick computer files notation, but also Heuermann's established use of forensic wiping software. Penalties. If convicted, the current charge is defendant Rex Heuermann faces multiple sentences of life without parole. Remand without bail is appropriate based on the serious, heinous nature of these serial murders, the strength of the people's case, the life incarceration the defendant faces upon conviction, the extreme measures this defendant took to attempt and to avoid apprehension for over a decade. And defendant's indictment on these additional charges, which now incorporate a 5th, 6th victim, the people remain steadfast that the only means to ensure the defendant's return to court is to remand the defendant without bail. Raymond Tierney.
There's an Exhibit B.
Yeah, so thankfully. So this is what we've seen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so why don't I tell the people why the new offenses can't be first-degree murder? So in New York, first-degree murder is defined. Whoops. Okay. So, and now we're speaking, they charged initially under 125.27 1A 11. Under the law, a defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree when, with the intent to cause the death of another person, the defendant causes the death of such person or of a third person, when the defendant intentionally causes the death of 2 or more additional persons within the state in a separate criminal transaction within a period of 24 months, when committed in a similar fashion or through a common scheme or plan. And I don't know, maybe they thought they couldn't establish a common scheme or plan. And I don't think it's gonna, it's not gonna make any real difference, in this scenario. But the first 3 all did happen within 24 months of each other. So that's why they charged with both, in case, like, well, all others fall apart, at least we still have the second degree option. And I'm sort of hoping, look, they've learned a lot. They've got okay, so I put some starred comments in here. I just want to start by saying, like, they've learned a lot about this guy from their investigation. They have his shit going so far back, and the knowing, like, what his reading material is and what he's thinking. I'm sure that, the profiler types and the people who work with trying to get confessions from people will be able to sort of manipulate him with all that information they have to hopefully get some information. I mean, I guess it just depends on, we had that Keys serial killer who, like, just wanted to be killed because he actually cared about his wife and kid and didn't want them,
Well,
right?
his kid, yeah.
Or his kid.
Yeah, I mean, Josh is like so knee deep into it, and I've listened to, like, I just always, and they always like refer to him as the most meticulous serial killer because he left the kill kits all over the country, sometimes years in advance. But he was like sloppy as shit. Like he was, what I mean? He's like dragging his final victim, like I don't know. And I listened to him, and I think he was playing with the feds and all of the, like, I don't know what that guy did or he didn't do, but I always get the impression that he was messing with them. Like, honestly, it's not to say that I don't think that he killed. People try to equate the number of skulls that he wrote in his own blood on his cell wall as his number of victims, but I don't know. I mean, Josh is so thoroughly going through everything that he can dig up on him, trying to look at, basically doing an FBI level investigation to try to figure out, if Israel Keys is
Yeah, so if you haven't listened to Josh's podcast, what's
true crime
given
bullshit. It's
true crime
phenomenal.
bullshit? It is. It's very good. Um, and he got this by the luck, got access when the feds accidentally released all this information on this serial killer, and then they pulled it off. Josh already had it all, and he's been looking for
Digging in.
bodies, and I mean, he's been doing so much stuff. But so Brooklyn was saying John Bittroff wants his case reopened and looked into, as he has maintained he was innocent all these years. Maybe it was actually Rex. And before we answer all those, and you've got Kathy asking who's John Bittroff, and then other people throwing other people in there, like Maine South Woodman's case in Massachusetts, and um, Al on the prowl. And I know when Bob and I were in law school, there we were in our criminal clinic, and he was working on a serial killer's case that I didn't really know all that much about, other from like I had heard some of the details, and he and I were reading a newspaper article about a guy that, oh, they found a new body or they arrested somebody new, and we were like, this sounds a lot like this other guy who's in prison. Now, he had actually killed some people, but was denying killing others. So it's not like he was wholly innocent. But I mean, I can't imagine how many people are convicted on, you know, these these serial killers who are out there. Your Keys, you're this guy, you're whoever, all the people we don't even know about. But
Scary. Well, I mean, and for whatever reason, when I have Bill Dorsch on, like we get, like I'm lucky to get 1,000 views. I mean, like I don't know if people don't understand that Bill Dorsch and I firmly believe that Gacy has more victims, and we're actively looking for them. I mean, we're going to conduct digs in 3 locations.
you guys
And
have some really good, like, well-developed leads. I
well,
mean,
like talking about a stark comparison, what you're seeing the task force do here with Heuermann in terms of trying to figure out everybody he may have killed. They did none of that with Gacy. Not nothing. Like I cannot. If you haven't listened to my Gacy podcast, like
you're crazy.
I don't know why you're like watching us on this. It's like that should be the primer to getting to know who I am. You learn about me. Gacy was a part of my life for 40 years. My dad was the guy's lawyer. It was the weirdest thing to have be a part of my life. And it's like that thing, like doing that thing, which is 36 episodes. It's epic. It's epic. There's never been anything done on Gacy like what I did. I talked to everybody that's alive, the cops. I had the lead prosecutor like perform his closing argument. My dad performed his opening argument. It's unbelievable. I dug into the victims more than anybody ever has. I tried. It's like I don't know how anybody could be watching this and not have listened to that. Like if you like our content, I guarantee you're going to be blown away by that
Well, yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, that's a
But
whole
you're
other
going to
level.
learn from it that from doing that podcast, Bill Dorsch, who has been hunting Gacy for 20 plus years, like found me. And like, he's like, I've been waiting for you for decades. And like, I just didn't know it. And like, we formed this team and we're going to go out and like, it's not me talking on a computer behind, a screen anymore. We're boots on the ground. If you know anything about me, I'm boots on the ground. It's like, I'm boots on the ground with Studi, the Lucy Studi story, that crazy story out in Iowa. And that's not over. I'll tell you that right now. There's some big developments on that. And like, I was the dude, I'm a lawyer by trade, but I'm an advocate and I'm out there trying to do shit. And if y'all have not watched the stuff that I've done with Bill and we've got 7 episodes up on YouTube, watch them if you care about stuff like this.
Well,
Like Gacy was a monster. Like as soon as I saw Heuermann, like the minute I saw his face, like he gives me an absolute Gacy vibe.
and like you said, the
Absolutely.
problem is that Chicago does not want to. They, under no circumstances, want to find another victim of Gacy.
Complete resistance because
So you guys are doing the hard work.
we're doing the work that law enforcement should have done 40 plus years ago. It's unbelievable. They when I say that they did nothing, they literally exhumed the remains out of Gacy's crawl space and found the 5 bodies that Gacy confessed to dumping in the Des Plaines River. And that is it. Gacy traveled all over the place. All like everywhere. That he was like just a nightmare machine who was.
All right, let's shift back to this serial killer. Let's thank Pam.
It's comparable.
No, for sure. It definitely is. And I
Why are you saying
absolutely
shift back? It's like it's the same thing. Like when I saw Heuermann's arrest and I saw what law enforcement and I see what they're doing here, it makes me sick.
I know.
So, and this guy, all right, so we started this with the presumption of innocence always.
Well, there's a couple other things that people said before we say where we stand, but
Put them up, throw them up.
well, I wanted to thank Pam because that was very thoughtful. We do need to wash this dirt off ourselves. But Brooklyn was
Thank you so much, Pammy, for that incredible generosity.
very thoughtful.
Really.
So Brooklyn says he didn't throw anything out. So, that's definitely probably where they're getting a lot of these old phone records, and things like that. And then obviously
350 devices. Like when Tierney gave I don't know if you were watching when Jay and I broke from Reed to cover the press conference, the amount of data they have is like stunning. Like this guy kept everything.
Yeah, that's what
like I'm telling like this is going to be a nightmare with this guy. I mean, just a nightmare. I don't even want to I don't even want to think.
Yeah, it definitely seems like Pammy's comment here that he was anal on details. Everything was planned, deliberate, and fatal. It's seeing that kind of stuff that, just as you're reading it, like, yeah, they have to spell it all out for us, but we didn't need it spelled out. It's like, oh, yeah, this guy's going through some trial and error. He's been doing this a long time. I mean, 1993.
90, that's what I'm trying to say, man. Talking 3 decades. That's unbelievable. That is terrifying. Hope Ain't Fear. Thank you so much for your generosity, gifting 5 DD memberships to 5 lucky members, new members. Family hug. Shiraz gifted 10. couple of always givers right here. Thank you so much, Shiraz, and
She
thank you for
gifted
modding
10
for us.
twice, so she gifted 20.
She's a phenomenal human being. And I mean, she's a
great
mod
year.
for us who just goes above and beyond. All our mods do. Our mods are amazing.
And it's a true statement, her handle there.
Yeah, for real. Thanks for always reading everything, Bob. And thanks for hanging in as he does. Y'all are great. That was by far.
Yeah, that was hard.
That was the toughest read, man. That was Meg P, and always give her $20 hollow. Thank you, Allie and Bob, for reading this. I'm sure it's not easy to read, and you want to know. We want you to know we appreciate it. We appreciate you. Thank you. And thank you for understanding that. It's like, look, Allie and I have been criminal defense attorneys for a long time. You know, we've handled some horrible cases with horrible facts and horrible things that were done to innocent people. And it's like, you're never used to it.
And you're in a different mindset when you're like, assessing your own client's case. You're detached, and it's very, separate, and, but yeah, I mean, obviously he's still.
Lisa warned me. Like Lisa was she's of the mindset this thing should have been redacted. You know, that the victims' families didn't need to see all this shit, man. And like, I had not read it.
I mean, they were standing there at the press conference. It seems that they, it's like there are a lot of details maybe they didn't need to know, but they already know the condition that their families' bodies were found. So to at least be getting information about the investigation, and that this might lead to other, victims being found and families being, although given horrible news, at least knowing what happened.
And I think that like this level of detail in terms of, and I can't know for certain, and every
Obviously,
single
right.
individual is different, but I mean, you can't ever really use the word comfort when talking about this from the standpoint of a victim, but in terms of feeling secure that they got the right person, that they've got the monster. I mean, this has to have them feeling pretty confident that they got the dude. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Yeah.
so it's hard to know. It's hard.
Right.
It's
But
hard.
obviously Lisa's point, is well taken. You read
Obvious, yeah,
some of that, and it's
for
like,
sure.
well, I knew something horrible happened. Bodies are, in pieces, and, but
I mean, just to sit there, like Gacy didn't have like a handbook like this, where like, because you just sit there and this guy's obsessively thinking about this shit.
yeah.
How warped.
But this level of detail, it really does help. Like they're saying there's numbers we don't know. There's like people learning these are the areas that he went to around the time frames that he was doing it. Like there's somebody out there that's helping their
Well,
here. Actually, Missy Mayhem said you know, exactly what I'm thinking, like
no, I mean, that's the counter to it. You know what I mean? It's like, and I'm sure that Tierney, I mean, they were at the press conference, I mean, like, this isn't like they didn't tell them, look, like there's a lot of brutal details in this stuff, and we're releasing it. And it's a court document, I mean, they typically don't redact out the brutal facts contained in, because it's the horrible, sad reality of what happened. It's like, I'm always of the mindset, like quit saying these fuckers' names. Like they just relish it. They love it. It's like a sick part of the game, for them, because of the narcissism. It's just like, it's like like the same way that they wouldn't use the kid's name in Ethan Crumbly's name at trial. They called him the shooter. You know, I mean, it's like we
Yeah,
have
well,
to
that's because
stop
he's a minor, but
still, but the
I
like
no, I see your point, right.
quit glorifying. Like that was the thing with the Gacy thing. I'm like, I'm not trying to talk about that guy. It's like I'm going to play the tapes and we're going to insert them, intertwine them with the narrative, but it's not about him. You know, it's about everything else. It's like, man, I don't know. So ultimately, I wanted to ask you, we're gonna wrap it like right about here. If you all have any questions real quick before we drop, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the
Oh, and let's let
concept.
everybody know tomorrow before
Oh,
bef
for sure. We'll
yes,
promote everything before we get off 100%.
right.
Trust me, girl, you know. Um, but I wanted to ask you in terms of like these serial killer cases, they're unusual in the sense that we're talking about crimes that were committed at different times, years apart, you know, and the question of severing these cases is always there. It's like, you know, I mean, technically, you know, because like from a defense attorney's perspective, you're like, okay, well, you've got really powerful evidence against them in like cases A, B, and C, not so much in D and E. And we're obviously concerned that you try these things all together, that the jury is, you know, if you're going to bootstrap it, that they're
Right.
just going to, you know, like extend the powerful evidence in the first three cases to the last two cases, you know, and
And
just by
that's
way.
clearly what happened with that guy we were talking about, where you handled his case with the clinic that because you told me he definitely committed like these other murders that he committed, those aren't in question. So I'm, sure that that was one of those situations. You try them all together, you're gonna get them all. But I mean, shit, 33 separate trials for Gacy. I mean,
Well, I
those were
asked Kunkel, like, I specifically asked them, like, the question. I'm like, did the issue of severance, like, he's like, well, yeah, we talked about it. Like, my father and Sam said, like, and with Gacy, they hadn't identified, like more than
so
like
many of them.
12 of the victims, like, because at
Right.
that point, they didn't have any of the technology. So they're, they have John Doe's, and it's like, they don't
But
even know
there
who they
they
are.
had all the bodies were, like, most of them in the very same place, like,
Right.
that was, at least you had that, and in the Dr. Anthony Garcia case, that was a situation where, it's not your typical serial killer over time, and technically, it shouldn't have qualified under the FBI's because it's supposed to be 3 series. This wasn't 3 series. Um but with him, I think that they can do some like that there's enough there that they seem connected and that there is sort of this MO, like getting his mom to be gone and getting rid of the tattoos and cutting, doing all the things to avoid, them being detected. Um, so I think it all depends on the specific facts of the case, but like what a huge waste of resources, and, obviously, I'm supposed to be thinking the rights of the defendant right now, and that's why I'm saying it depends on the situation, but to have tried, like, Gacy in separate trials,
Ugh,
like,
could you
the
imagine?
millions of dollars, we wouldn't need all the
Well, and they
first
were
stuff, but
importing the
still.
jury from Rockford.
Right,
It was like the
right.
whole thing. It was like it was the first time in Illinois that they had ever even thought of the concept, instead of moving the trial to a different county, just bringing the jury in, change of veneer, basically.
If
So,
all they had was, like, he likes his wife and kid to be gone, and he, like, and that was, like, the only connection, then maybe you'd be arguing that there's not enough evidence against each to try them all together.
well,
Um,
and so like somebody had tweeted an interesting comment to me about, there's like this active investigation of this trip that he made to Nevada, Heuermann. and they're actively processing this DNA. Like in terms of like a federal type case, you know, I mean, like
I mean, they
if they
just don't.
start finding bodies in area, like the guy traveled.
Did he use a gun?
Who
I mean,
knows?
how are you getting federal jurisdiction? In order to maybe trap the federal, bringing someone in
From
for the
Jersey,
bringing them in, convincing them to come to you from another state, that would definitely do it.
or he picked him up in Jersey and drove back over to
Yeah,
New
for
York.
sure. And I'd have to think about it. You might be able to rope in
Oh,
some sort of
dude,
federal charge
if
if
he
you
made
trap.
connections like via like the internet, like
Oh yeah, if he made connections via the internet.
like yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of ways the feds can get you.
Right, and I was gonna say maybe even if he were to travel out of state for the purposes of committing a crime, um, but it's just not typical for the feds to get involved in a case like that. That's the whole reason why they kind of provide support to the states in serial killer cases.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, so the final question I want to get into you with is like we start from the presumption, our baseline is presumption of innocence based on
Which
what you
he's
said.
maintaining all the way until he's convicted, but I think that they have, you know, laid out a very, very heavy case, and if they can establish that stuff at trial, then I don't I think it's gonna be very easy for a jury to convict him.
Well, I can't see the defense other than some kind of mental defect. I mean, they have
Let's
this
New
is
York's,
this is overwhelming. Yeah, they have.
no, I wonder which kind though, because if it's that you can't control your,
Oh,
um
whether it's
right.
McNaughton or some kind of.
She
I mean,
lacks
just
criminal responsibility by reason of mental disease or defect. If you find the defendant has, oh, this isn't the right. Um,
Dawn. This is where justice is served. I'm assuming you meant served, not severed, right? Yes, this guy is sick. Yes, yes, yes. He's a
okay,
monster.
so a person lacks criminal responsibility by means of mental disease or defect when at the time of the prohibited conduct as a result of mental disease or defect, the person lacked the substantial capacity to know or appreciate either nature of its consequences, that what he was doing was wrong. So that's a no.
That's a no.
And they
I mean,
don't,
his little planning documents give us that.
right. Um, the lack of substantial capacity to know and appreciate, right? Nope, nope,
We'll read them.
nope. I know. We know that none of those fit. I'm trying to see if they also have the one that he's unable to control his
Right.
behavior.
Compulsion.
Right. Uh, a quick glance of it doesn't look like they have that one. It looks like they just have the, you know, not understanding the nature and consequences of your conduct and such that it's wrong. And there's not even any point in going through the elements for that because clearly that's not even if he has a mental disease or defect, which I am sure he has, it's not one that he's unable to appreciate the criminal, nature of his conduct.
Right.
Right.
So that it does. There's no element of
I mean, it's a quick
compulsion.
review, and it doesn't look like that. Um, looking at their penal law, sort of real quickly.
I mean, the hairs are like in where they're found. I mean, again, you got the presumption of innocence, of course, but in terms of strength of case of what we know, this leans about as heavy guilty as I can imagine. So, I mean, obviously everything's got to be vetted at trial, but feel pretty confident they got the right guy on this one. Pretty confident.
Right.
I mean, I hate to judge a book by its cover, but this
And you're
dude,
not. We're
I
he
am.
maintains his.
I'm judging that I'm not like, dude. I've said that. Like, I mean, everything's got to be vetted at trial, but on the strength of what we've seen in terms of the DNA, which I'm sure will be vetted by the defense.
I mean, just his Palm Pilot alone. I mean, come on.
Right. I mean,
His notes and his.
I feel very, very confident that they got the right guy here.
Right. I just
Very,
feel.
very confident. So, all right, y'all. I
But
know
tomorrow, me and attorney Melanie Little are doing a little lady lawyers thing on Karen Reed. So don't miss it. It's tomorrow, 5 p.m.
dual stream.
dual stream Central Time. No, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Central Time. And if you're not already following Melanie Little, definitely check out her channel as well. She's always bringing a lot of knowledge, and they seem to be having a
And
pretty interesting.
you get this one without my big mouth. So that is like that's worth a price of admission right there, because
Yeah.
then Allison just gets to like spit knowledge for however
Yeah,
long.
but
So,
Melanie's gonna be spitting knowledge too. So
yeah. Well,
um,
I tweeted it today. I don't know if you're not on Twitter. Allie was up till 4 a.m. working on demonstrative evidence for you guys because pertaining to the tail light and the evidence that was collected, chain of custody. So if you want to law nerd out and really dig into things that we dig into, which is the critical chain of custody of evidence that's collected and where it goes and how it's documented from the time of that it's recovered up until trial. That's your stream right there. Allie worked like I couldn't believe it. We had to leave the house at 6 this morning.
Melanie's working on all weekend on what she's like. We both got little assignments, and so
It's going to be a great
it'll
one.
be
It's
good.
going to be a great one. Couple powerhouse badass female attorneys. I don't even not even female, just badass attorneys. Period. So make sure you all check that out. I'll be excitedly watching it myself. That'll be fun. That'll be fun. It's Allie's first foray away from Defense Diaries. So
And thanks, Meg P. I can't remember if we thanked you. Yeah, and I was like, she was like, "Well, do you want to host?" And I'm like, "Oh God, no, I don't know how to do that." Bob asks me questions, and anybody who's
remember
watched
when we
the.
first started this, everybody's like, Bob always is talking. And I'm like, man, that's how we do this shit. Like, I'm the dude who asks the questions. It's like how we set it up. So, yeah,
Well,
I'm excited for it. I'm excited.
Anybody that's watched for a while knows, like, if you're not here, then I'm like, Jay, can you get on with me? And then the one, like, you leave me alone, and I'm like, yeah, Bob's. I think I hear him coming. Is that you, Bob? But
Yeah. Well, I love you. You're the best. I'm so excited for you tomorrow. It's going to be a great, great live. So make sure you guys, if you can't catch it live because you're out and about, make sure you watch it on the replay. I'd like to get this one out there. So make sure that you hit that like button. If you like the content, maybe think about becoming a member.
minimize the chat and hit that thumbs up.
Hit that thumbs up, like, share, subscribe. It really helps the algo. If you're on replay crew, leave a comment. Also like it, please. That really, it helps. It gets it out into the world. And we really, really appreciate you guys hanging with us on a Saturday night. Probably had better stuff to do. And you chose to hang with us, and we love you for it. So, because without y'all, I'd just be an old man.
Talking about a lot of cases.
Talk to you next time.